What sounds like a conspiracy theory, but is actually true. The Greenbrier Bunker. People love conspiracies about huge underground complexes built for the rich and famous to survive nuclear fallouts, think Denver Airport, and that's exactly what Greenbrier is. The bunker was built under the Greenbrier Resort for congresspeople to escape to, and was kept a secret for 30 years, even though people suspected, why is there a 7,000-foot airstrip for a town of 3,000 people? For the entire time it was functional, every congressperson was assigned a bunk. These days you can take tours, and I'm sure we'll hear about the next bunker once it's defunct. That the US government actually had a paranormal unit. That movie, The Men Who Stare at Goats, it was based on a true story. The US military was actively trying to see if they could find people with skills like stopping the heart of a goat, or dowsing, or psychic spying. The whole thing pretty much fell apart when it was deemed that the people participating were not very effective. If you have to stare at a goat for hours in order to get it to fall over and die, how are they supposed to make use of it for assassinations? But bottom line, it did exist. Same with the Nazis having a paranormal unit during the 40s. Hitler believed in acquiring the Spear of Destiny because he believed it would help him win the war, along with other occult stuff. That's partly what the Wolfenstein games have made popular. Your iPhone is designed to start getting worse as soon as the new models come out. I remember this being a big deal like 7 or 8 years ago. Someone can fact-check me as I'm hazy on the details, but I believe it's related to the battery. Every year, the same week that the new iPhone comes out, the latest iOS becomes available for download. The new iOS is not optimized for your current device's battery, and as such the phone compromises performance in order to maintain a similar battery life. Coupled with the normal wear and tear on the battery, your phone will start sucking just so the battery can last a little longer. Planned obsolescence in general sounds like tinfoil hat nonsense, but it's a fairly pervasive corporate practice in the tech industry. The Black Sox scandal was a major sports controversy that rocked the baseball world in 1919. It involved members of the Chicago White Sox, one of the best teams in the league at the time, who were accused of throwing the World Series against the Cincinnati Reds. The scandal involved 8 players, including shoeless Joe Jackson, who allegedly accepted bribes from gamblers to intentionally lose games. At first, many people thought the scandal was just a conspiracy theory as the players denied any wrongdoing. The team was arguably in the top position. Some of the accused were insanely popular, and some fans believed that the accusations were just a way to tarnish the team's reputation. However, an investigation uncovered evidence of a complex scheme involving gamblers, team owners, and players. The investigation revealed that the players had definitely accepted bribes to the tune of a couple million today. I'm not a huge sports fan at all, but I am a history nut, and this was one of the most significant scandals in sports history, and it changed a lot of things for the entire sport, including getting a commissioner of baseball. Even though they were technically declared criminally innocent, all 8 players involved were all banned for life, and they will never be inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame despite repeated attempts to do so over the decades. That the Ministry of Information in the UK spread misinformation that eating lots of carrots could improve night vision during World War II. They made this up to confuse the Germans. They had a new radar tech that allowed them to pinpoint German bombers from greater distances than before, and the carrot story was a ruse. That said, I don't know what's true on the internet these days, so I'm half waiting for the comment that this story in itself was a ruse. Free school lunch programs are being pushed in many areas by the large multinational corporations that own the contracts. Sodexo is a multinational French company worth over $17 billion. Compass is actually owned by Chartwells, which is UK-based. I'm all for making sure kids eat healthy food, and they should not have to pay for it. But these companies don't promote the healthy part. They also do a lot of jail contracts as well. Next time you hear, think of the children, look for the company who will provide the items. Edit. I am pro-free lunch for kids. I am just anti-large corporations making money off our government. That is the point some people are not getting. And even with all of that being true, it's still better than these kids missing out because their parents can't afford to pay. Of course, it's also in a giant corporation's best interest, so they help fund it because of the obvious ROI. Cloud seeding came about during the Vietnam era as a means of warfare. From what Eve read, the project was mostly a waste of time for combat. As it turns out, shitty weather for the enemy also means shitty weather for you. Its only real effectiveness was in the crops the North lost during months of rain. Today, it's used to keep Colorado's ski parks packed with snow. I'm not an American, but even as a dumb adult, in 2002, I remember saying to friends of mine they were already doing this, and we entered a stupid game of dropping trigger words in our emails to see when the FBI would show up. People all around, and weirdly Americans too, completely underestimate the capability and knowledge that exists in the US to implement stuff like this. You put a man on the moon, why would spying your infrastructure be any challenge? It's rumored the next bunker isn't far away, just outside Beckley, West Virginia at the Summit Bechtel Reserve/National Boy Scout Center. I live by there, and there's tons of stories about armed guards always in the woods nearby, and contract workers who brought in loads of concrete for weeks on end when it was being constructed and had to get out and wait on their trucks while someone else drove them away and emptied them. The entire area has miles of coal mines underneath that were shut down years ago, so it makes sense there could easily be bunkers under there. What is really funny is that people living in the area totally knew about it. Either they or family members helped build it, or they figured it out from other hints. Employees of the actual Greenbrier knew when the food stockpiles were being refreshed because the employees suddenly got the stuff that was about to expire. I feel sorry for anyone who sees the pictures of the injuries. Horrific. Beyond her injury, the judgment was so large against McDonald's because they had literally over 1,000 complaints from customers about the coffee being too hot, and they ignored them prior to this incident happening. Thus, enormous punitive damages. Kinda linked. There was a brilliant little app launched with the film where there were 3 goats on the screen. You would then state which goat will die before starting it, and if you had these paranormal abilities, that goat would indeed fall over. There was a secret invisible button, so you could select which goat would die to convince your colleagues and friends. I had a book written by a guy who was part of Run This program. The big thing they were testing for was remote viewing, where they could show a person a picture of a place, and then the person had to try and view in their mind what was happening there, or what they could see there. They were hoping for a group of remote spies to view enemy activity from their office. Was the book Penetrations by Ingo Swann? It's an interesting book if you come into it believing he isn't lying and this is real. But with a skeptical mind, he comes off as insane and extremely paranoid. I'm from Huntsville, Alabama. They literally threw a parade for Werner von Braun when he arrived, and he's still credited as forming the City Symphony because he missed the European arts. My grandma, post-depression hoarder, literally kept a jar of rocks from his parade float until she died. People drank the Kool-Aid so hard back then. Sort of. It hasn't been proven the new iOS version specifically hurt older phones, but it's hard to ignore the near universal complaints. Plus, it almost always uses more memory and processing power. It's not that it's not optimized for the battery. It's just that the extra processing needed isn't as noticeable on the newer/faster phones. The thing they got in trouble for is throttling phones when the batteries started to degrade. Generally, they start degrading noticeably after about 2 years of usage. So if you buy a new phone when it comes out, about 2 years later, it'll be slower than it was previously. And now there's a new one coming out that's 2 generations ahead of what you have. As far as the battery itself goes, all devices have that issue. But as far as I know, no other brand will throttle devices due to a degrading battery. So you just get worse battery life at the same speed. Tire? Seriously? Every couple of years, they presumably run low on cash and announce a new miraculous find somewhere that seems to support their latest fantastic claims about Amelia Earhart. Said claim will immediately fall apart once examined by external experts, but this will be forgotten by the time the next miraculous find comes up in a couple of years. They've been at this for decades. It was still used in the 70s in the psychiatric hospital I worked in. It certainly could affect the memory short term, but the memories did return usually within 24 hours. And although I have seen patients that it didn't help, I've also seen it do things that look like a miracle as well. So still out on that one. Not sure if I would try it or not if I were in need and it were offered. Not even sure if it's still an option these days. But these companies don't promote the healthy part. This is awfully debatable. In fact, it's one of those conversations where more affluent citizens tend not to recognize the purpose of programs because they're not actually facing the problems those programs are designed for. Simply getting enough calories is the goal for the low-income families that rely on free and reduced lunch. It's better for a poor kid who isn't going home to a kitchen stocked with cold cuts and Doritos to hit his minimum caloric needs on pizza, cookies, and soda than it is for him to throw away whatever the current health food fad sweep in California and go hungry. Yep. I've seen this many times. The one that was most obvious to me was when I watched a show where the characters were primarily speaking French. Within 2 hours, there was an ad on my phone for the best restaurants in Lyons. I have no interest in visiting France, and nothing in my browsing history or anything else would have made it seem that I did. Physical cash can't really be tracked due to the sheer amount of logistics involved. Let's be realistic about it, and only focus on dollar bills of a value of 100 SD and up had an RFID chip with a unique ID in it. There are about 11.5 billion 100 US dollars bills in circulation. They get torn, wet, dirty, and scuffed in all manner of ways. The cost of tracking each 100 US dollars bill with RFID would be generous for a very limited use. Tracking would only occur when there would be an RFID reader, meaning only in legit places. Zero insight in crime using this method. Similar, but worse for optical scanners where you would have the cashier drag the bill across a scanner when handling it. I just can't see a way to track physical money from transaction to transaction that would ever realistically work. Fun fact, the Denver metro area has the second largest amount of federal offices and agencies in the country. Washington, D.C. is the first. We also have Cheyenne Mountain and NORAD down by Colorado Springs. Metro Denver was supposedly the USSR's second highest priority nuclear missile target after Washington during the Cold War. Yeah, so maybe we should stop making men's and women's washrooms as well. The toilets just need doors rather than stalls. It's pretty easy to fix, and suddenly there would be twice as many toilets for everyone. I know several LGBTQ+ bars that have done this conversion with everyone happy about it. It sold better at higher temps because it would be at about the right temperature when it made it to the office. That MCDs had been warned they were serving dangerously hot product, but they didn't change it. The biggest change after this event was that they make much better cups and lids now. I have drop-to-go hot beverage cups and had them hit the floor and roll without spilling. This was unthinkable before the lawsuit. And the really funny thing is, all the lady wanted was to have her medical bills paid. If they'd just done the honorable and comparatively inexpensive thing, we would never be talking about this accident now. But nope, instead they paid millions upon millions to lawyers and consultants and slanderous PR people, only to ultimately lose and have to pay out enormous sums of money to the lady and suffer a reputational black eye. That reminds me of the unreleased pin and teller game for Sega CD. Most people know of it because they've heard of Desert Bus, but there were more little mini-games and tricks than that. A couple of them involved fortune-telling or some other thing, where you'd have the victim of the prank be the first player, and the second player would access a menu beforehand to set up certain outcomes. There was also a vertical scrolling shooter minigame with a two-player mode. The idea being that if you played it single player, it was an average vertical shooter, but if you played it two players, one of the players could cheat by entering certain button combinations to make the other player lose lives or get swarmed with enemies. If you swap controllers, it still worked. Immediately, the US and the UK responded with a military marine blockade on Mexico's coast, except that straight up didn't happen. There was a boycott, but that is something non-state actors can organize, and it's absolutely no maritime blockade. Like, show me your source, and then tell me what warships were actually deployed for this supposed blockade, and you'll find a stunning lack of evidence. And silver also did not happen. It almost did, but the US conned to buy silver, though not without some bickering on it. After that, the US and UK governments encouraged the oil companies to negotiate a sale price with the Mexican government and a payment plan, because they now realized it was a legitimate nationalization. The UK actually didn't until 1947, and it got substantially more money from the sales than the US did. There was a documentary on printers about this on YouTube. Epson. Printers had a life expectancy of 25K pages, or something like that, stated in the manual. They gave a new printer a huge stack of paper and printed away. And sure enough, at that exactly number, it developed a strange fault. But then they had this Russian dude that had written a piece of software that was able to reset this counter. And everything worked after that. I did not print enough, but I did download and try that software, just to extend the life of that printer. Served me well for many years. This is so stupid, no. What is stupid is Canadians acting like building millions of homes in the next 75 years is impossible. And no, we don't need to build 60 homes. A family of 4 lives in one home. Canada's population in 1900. 5 Canada's population in 1975. 24 you think those 19 people just lived in ditches? The government has been listening to phone calls ever since they were first installed into homes. Phones were like the first internet. You could reach to the outside world and bring info to you, instead of leaving your home to talk to your neighbor. It was a series of cables connecting everyone together and easily surveilled. He was part of a college study he volunteered for that some people believe was connected to MKUltra, but it's never been proven. He wasn't given drugs, though. Instead, he was asked his beliefs and then had to talk to a lawyer because they are good at arguing in theory, who belittled and destroyed his beliefs. I had a guy come through when I was working at a craft store frame shop with a picture of the atomic artillery unit they tested back in the day, with a big OL mushroom cloud in the background. Through the conversion, He made it apparent that he was downrange in a trench for that pick, and that he was still fighting the government to get them to acknowledge how they've affected his health. Crazy stuff. Good point. Although, if that ever becomes the case, it is going to suck for us men, not having to wait forever for the line to the bathroom / partial S. But on the bright side, at least between segregation via race in the past, segregation by sex / gender now / in the more recent past, and the surplus of bathrooms that were built with those considerations in mind and exist to date, they might coincidentally help make the queues more reasonable overall, if all bathrooms were to become completely desegregated in the future. Person shrugging, slightly smiling face. Slight side note, but did you notice in the movie about the black ladies who do the calculations for NASA, the main character is gone for too long each day because the colored bathroom is too far? So the boss solution, the guy played by Kevin Costner, smashes the sign on the bathroom that says colored only? And it's like, bruh, I get it, solidarity and equality, but the problem was the white bathroom was close and the colored one was too far. He should have smashed the whites only sign. It's a fictionalized scene, but in the movie the white restrooms didn't specifically say white. Only the colored one specified that. When Catherine first goes to use the restroom, she sees a sign that says ladies' restroom and heads toward it, and a group of white women come out and give her a look. My dad, a Vietnam War vet with untreated PTSD. My grandfather was this only World War II. In the 50s, he stumbled upon Scientology and dove deep into it for a while. Ron himself was very active with the group they were in. My dad said that on a retreat, Ron asked, "Are you a good operating Thetan?" or some such, and thought it was a really strange question to ask a kid. Also, that it was weird seeing your parents crying their eyes out for extended periods during the practice of running. At some point, the spell was broken, and my grandpa never looked back at Scientology. To me, the nuttiest thing about Scientology, and the most unbelievable thing about the fact that anybody believes in it, is that Ron Hubbard was a science fiction and fantasy novelist. A guy who made up stories about space travel and the supernatural came out with a brand spanking new UFO religion, and people just said, yeah, seems legit. I'm in. It'd be like if J.K. Rowling wrote a book purporting to be about actual witchcraft, and people adopted it as a spiritual practice. Single-stall, one-person restrooms just aren't feasible at any kind of scale, though. The amount of space required just to serve one person at a time is unrealistic for most public settings, and as much as I enjoy having a restroom to myself, in public settings, it's more important to me not to have to wait an exorbitant amount of time because there aren't enough restrooms to go around. There are also compromised designs, which use a much more private stall but keep the communal sink area. Typical US stalls are done that way because they are cheap and let the room be hosed down if desired. It's a fictionalized scene, but in the movie the white restrooms didn't specifically say white, only the colored ones specified that. When Catherine first goes to use the restroom, she sees a sign that says ladies' restroom and heads toward it, and a group of white women come out and give her a look. Sure, but you can fit almost 2 urinals in the same amount of space you fit a single stall. It's part of why men's room has shorter lines in crowded places. With the same real estate, you can accommodate more people peeing at the same time. This is objectively useful for men. Taking away urinals for more stalls overall will still be a net loss in the number of peeing stations there are, and men will experience a decrease in benefit. Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.